Welcome to a Land Rover guide to the Land Cruiser.
Left hand side of the engine bay, also really good access to the headlight right in here. Lots of space to be able to get in and move around. We've got some aftermarket wiring here for a light bar, fits in really nicely. The brackets for the radiator are really nice and meaty. This is one bracket for the radiator and one on the top here. They're just really meaty bushes and two on the other side. It makes it A, easy to get the radiator out of the vehicle, and B, they're less likely to wear. They wear quite a lot, and you get on a 300 TDI and you get a lot of movement in there, which is not ideal on your radiator. It's quite an expensive, important bit of equipment. Battery location is just the same as a normal car really, which it tends to be a quirk of Defenders that the battery's under the seat box, but it just makes so much more sense to have it in the engine bay. It's just so much easier to have it here. You can test the voltage really easily whilst you're working on different elements, and it's just here. That's another benefit of this large engine bay. They've got the space to be able to put the battery in here. Fuel injection pump is actually Bosch VE, the same as on the 300 TDI, albeit this time it's on the left hand side rather than the right hand side of the vehicle, but it's essentially the same pump. So you see the fuel goes in there, and this is the throttle arm, and the feed comes out there. You might recognise it just doesn't have the boost control because there's no turbo. So the pump's the same, which is amazing actually, because you can use the knowledge you've got on one and use it on the other vehicle. The difference is that this has 6 injection pipes. This pipe here is solid, whereas on the Defender it's plastic, but this one has probably cracked at some point and they've had to braze it to link it back. So I'm not really a fan of these metal pipes because they can vibrate and break and become brittle. The other thing for this, to time the engine, you actually have to take off these bolts, the 3 bolts holding the pump onto the engine, and then rotate the actual pump in this housing. You put a dial gauge indicator with a special tool in the back here, and it will tell you when it gets to the maximum lift by twisting the pump around. On a Land Rover, you just stick the pin in, and you can do that whilst just taking off the little cover on the timing chase. So actually I think Land Rover's got a more idiot-proof way of timing the engine, whereas this requires a special tool, and it's a lot trickier, I would believe, to twist the injection pump round rather than having it locked and just adjusting the pulley that it attaches to. I think Land Rover win in that respect. Power steering pump is down here. It's a little bit inaccessible, but it's a lot smaller, it seems like. Coming into the wheel arch, there's an amazing feature down here. It's not really the engine bay, but it's related to the work you do in the engine bay. We've got the normal wheel arch here, and we've got this basically rubber skirt. This one's a bit tatty, but underneath we've got access to the engine bay all the way along. There's nothing impeding apart from the spring here. The same around the back here, you've got access to all the little fiddly bits that you don't normally get access to, because on a Land Rover the wing comes right the way down here. You've got no access. So here, where I said the power steering pump was not really accessible, you've got access to bits you wouldn't otherwise have. So that's a definite win to Toyota for the benefit of getting access to the bottom of the engine without having to take anything off. Starter motor, very easy access. Maybe not quite as good as the 300 TDI, but you probably don't have to remove as much stuff to get access to it. What I don't like is all this cabling. It's just sat here, just laying on top of the starter motor. I assume that's where it's supposed to be, but it doesn't seem like a very good idea. The oil filter is so easy to get to. It makes it amazing. You just have to unscrew it from here. The downside is the oil is going to run out and run right down the vehicle, but you can easily catch that in a pan. It's not going to drip anywhere. On the 300 TDI is a bit of a nightmare. You've got to get your arm up in to undo it and then get it out down through the vehicle, and then it drips all over the diff. Anything that makes it easier to do maintenance means you're more likely to do the maintenance on a regular basis, so that is a win for Toyota. In behind here there's the oil cooler. Similar to the TD5, it's a kind of a unit in here that runs the coolant around it within the block. That's a better design for me because it means it's not part of the radiator, which means you don't have to deal with the oil loss, and the oil cooler being in part of the radiator keeps it separate. which makes it easier to work on the cooling system. Dipstick, really easy, just like a 300 TDI, really easy to get access to. The inlet manifold is pretty easy to take off actually. You've got these bolts down in here and you've got very easy access. There's also a benefit that the gasket is actually one for each port. So if you've got any warping in the head, it's not going to break the manifold gasket. Whereas on a 300 TDI, at least the exhaust gasket, very easy to break in various points because of twisting of the head perhaps. So a lot better for maintenance and reliability. Down here we've got actually a drain cock for the cooling system. It's essentially a screw with a pipe on the end, just like you would get on a normal kind of house radiator. You just unscrew that a bit. It's really easy to get access to this terminal nut, and makes draining the coolant a lot easier. 300 TDI is around about here somewhere, and I usually end up having to do it left-handed and sort of screwing like that just to get the thing on. It's got a washer, and you need to replace the washer, or if it gets chewed up you've got to put sealant on it, which is not ideal. This is made to be released and done up to actually drain the coolant quite easily. So win for Toyota for that. Finally we come to probably the most ridiculous thing on this engine. So I imagine they probably made this prototype, the engineers in Toyota, and then realised they had no way of getting the accelerator cable to connect to the injection pump. So they probably gave it to the intern in the back office and just said figure this out, and they came up with this here. They've essentially just taken a cable straight from the cab, slung it over the top of the engine, made up a bracket to attach it to this bolt, got this cam arrangement which then they need to get down, so they've just got a shaft on here which then goes to an arm, which then goes to a lever, which then goes onto the throttle lever. This to me is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, look at the play in that, and that's just by design. That's nothing you can do about that. But this arm as well, that's going to have play in it. This is going to have play in it. This thing rubs over time. I don't know if it droops or sags, but it's rubbing on the accelerator cable, so potential for that to snap. And it operates like this. I do get that this is a rod because it's got a push. You know, we can't have a cable that's pushing this, it won't work. But this actually, it's the same pump, but this works in the opposite direction to the 300 TDI. 300 TDI pulls this way, so it would start like that and pull this way. So you could have a bracket with the cable pulling on it. In here there's a sort of an arm that goes, shaft that goes down with an arm on it, and I only assume that you do this to pull it, whereas on the 300 TDI you're doing that to turn it. So, but essentially there's a lever in there that you've just got to move that direction, and whether it's turning that way or that way. But like, I don't specifically know why they've got this type of pump or why that has to go in that direction. It just seems a bit of a bodge to me, really. So on the whole, I really like this engine bay. It's so easy to work on. I thought the 300 TDI was easy to work on compared to the later engines, which tend to have plastic all around, but this is like a breath of fresh air. It's actually really impressive. Toyota have obviously built this thing to be maintained. It's built as a fleet vehicle, and fleet managers just care about how easy it is to maintain, because you've got costs associated with maintaining vehicles, and you've got skill, things you need to train people on how to do them. This is easy, simple, quick to access pretty much all the the obvious stuff that means you're more likely to do it. So that's a benefit, that's a win for Toyota for the engine bay.
Click here to go to the next video. Right here. That's where the button is. Right there.